The space station called floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was a massive structure made of black metal and glass. For 500 years, the most dangerous species in the galaxy had gathered here once every decade. They came to talk, to argue, and sometimes to fight. This was the summit of claws, and only predators were allowed inside. Park stood near the back of the great chamber and tried not to look afraid. He was 32 years old, born on Earth in a small town near the sea. He had spent 15 years studying alien cultures and languages. He had worked hard to become a diplomat, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this room. The chamber was enormous. The ceiling rose 50 meters above the floor, covered in carvings of hunts and kills from 100 different worlds. The air smelled of musk and blood and something sharp that made his nose burn. Everywhere he looked, he saw teeth and claws and eyes that glowed in the dim light. They sat in the northern section. They looked like wolves that had learned to walk on two legs. Their fur was silver and white, and their eyes were the color of gold coins. Each one stood over 2 meters tall. Their leader, High Arbiter, had a scar running across his muzzle from some ancient battle. When he spoke, his voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. They claimed the eastern side. They were reptiles with scales as black as space itself. Heat-sensing pits dotted their faces, and their teeth curved backward like hooks. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they had all the time in the universe. The oldest among them was called the. She had lived for 300 years and had killed more enemies than anyone could count. They prowled the western gallery. They were cats, or something like cats. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and stripes on their fur that glowed softly blue and green. They never sat still. Even when they appeared to rest, their tails twitched and their ears rotated toward every sound. Dozens of other species filled the remaining seats. Some had wings, some had tentacles, some had bodies covered in spines or shells or thick armor, but they all had one thing in common. They were hunters, killers, the top of their food chains. And then there was a human. A species with no claws, no fangs, no venom, no armor. A species that the predator races had dismissed for decades as soft and weak. Prey that had somehow stumbled into space. "Stop fidgeting," whispered. She sat beside him in the observer section, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was 60 years old and had spent her entire life fighting for humanity's place among the stars. She was the one who had finally convinced the conquered to let humans attend the summit, not as members, just as observers. It was a small victory, but it was a start. "They keep looking at me," whispered back. "They are curious. Humans have never been here before. Let them look." And the row ahead turned and stared at. The alien's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air. Then it made a sound that might have been a laugh and turned away. "Did it just smell me?" asked. "Yes, they identify individuals by scent. It now knows exactly who you are and will remember your smell forever." "That is uncomfortable." Smiled slightly. "Welcome to predator diplomacy." The great doors at the front of the chamber opened with a deep grinding sound. High Arbiter rose from his seat and lifted his head. A howl burst from his throat, long and haunting. It echoed off the walls and made his chest vibrate. One by one, the other joined in. Then they added their hissing calls and their screaming roars. The noise was overwhelming. Pressed his hands over his ears and fought the urge to run. Then suddenly silence. They entered. She was ancient. Her scales had faded from black to dark gray, and old wounds marked her body like a map of wars. She walked slowly, leaning on a staff made from the bone of some massive creature. Her guards flanked her, young warriors with murder in their eyes. But barely noticed the guards. His attention was fixed on what they carried in her other arm. A cub. It was tiny, no bigger than a human toddler. Its scales were soft and pale gray, not yet hardened into the black armor of an adult. Its eyes were large and curious, looking around the chamber at all the strange faces. It made a small chirping sound and pressed closer to its grandmother's chest. That is, whispered. It is tradition for leaders to bring their youngest descendants to their first summit. It teaches them about power and politics. She brought a baby to this place. Cubs are sacred among the predator races. No one would ever harm a child here. It would be the greatest crime imaginable. Even enemies who have sworn to kill each other will protect each other's young. Watched as the took her seat, settling the cub in her lap. Squirmed and chirped, reaching toward the glowing lights on the ceiling. The old made a soft rumbling sound that seemed to calm the little one. For a moment, forgot about his fear. There was something universal about that scene, a grandmother holding her grandchild. It did not matter that they were aliens from a species that could tear him apart without effort. In that moment, they looked like any family anywhere. High Arbiter began to speak, outlining the agenda for the summit. Territory disputes, hunting rights, trade agreements, the usual business of predator politics. Pulled out his tablet and began taking notes, recording everything he could for his reports back to Earth. But his eyes kept drifting back to the little cub in his arms. Had fallen asleep now, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Her tiny claws, still soft and harmless, curled against her grandmother's scales. Did not know it yet, but in 2 days, that small creature would change his life forever. She would change the fate of his entire species, and it would all happen in the space of a single heartbeat. For now, though, he simply watched and waited and tried to ignore the golden eyes of predators tracking his every move. The summit had begun. The first day of the summit was violent. Had expected arguments. He had expected loud voices and angry words. What he had not expected was blood on the floor before lunch. It started with a mining dispute. The claim they had found a rich asteroid field in unclaimed space. The field was in their territory. Words became growls. Growls became roars. Then a young warrior leaped across the chamber and slashed a commander across the face. The commander did not fall. He did not cry out. He simply wiped the blood from his fur and smiled, showing all his teeth. "You want to play, little cat," he said. Within seconds, the two were locked in combat. Claws flashed. Teeth snapped. The other delegates pulled back to give them room, watching with hungry eyes. No one tried to stop the fight. Later learned that this was normal. Ritual combat was an accepted way to settle disputes among predator races. The first one to yield or fall unconscious lost the argument. The fight lasted 8 minutes. The was faster, but the was stronger. In the end, the wolf-like alien pinned the cat creature to the ground and pressed his claws against its throat. "Yield," he growled. The hissed but went still. "I yield." The released him and walked back to his seat like nothing had happened. Servants rushed in to clean the blood from the floor. The summit continued. Sat frozen in his seat. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Beside him had not moved at all. "This happens often," he managed to ask. "At least once per summit, sometimes more. The predator races respect strength. Fighting is how they prove themselves. And if someone dies, then they die. It is considered an honorable death." Looked down at his soft human hands. No claws, no weapons. If anyone challenged him to ritual combat, he would be dead in seconds. He had never felt so out of place in his entire life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of negotiations and threats and barely controlled violence. Took notes until his fingers cramped. He recorded everything he could, knowing that his reports would help Earth understand these powerful and dangerous species. By the time the first day ended, he was exhausted. He returned to his small quarters and collapsed on the bed without even removing his shoes. He dreamed of teeth and claws and golden eyes that never blinked. The second day was calmer. The major disputes had been settled, either through agreement or combat. Now the delegates discussed smaller matters, trade routes, communication protocols, scientific exchanges. It was almost boring compared to the violence of the day before. During the afternoon recess, excused himself and walked to the observation deck. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to be somewhere that did not smell like predators. The observation deck was empty when he arrived. A massive window looked out at the stars, and for a long moment just stood there and breathed. The universe was so vast, so beautiful, so indifferent to the small dramas of organic life. He thought about home, about his mother who ran a small restaurant near the sea, about his younger sister who was studying medicine at the university in Seoul, about the friends he had left behind when he joined the diplomatic corps. Did they know where he was right now? Did they understand how far he had traveled, how strange this place was? A sound broke his thoughts, a small chirping noise like a bird or a baby. Turned. Was there. The little cub had somehow wandered away from her guards. She stood near the far wall, her large eyes fixed on something shiny on the floor. Her soft gray scales caught the light from the stars. She chirped again and took another unsteady step. His first instinct was to call for help. A cub alone on a space station was dangerous, but before he could move, he noticed where was walking. A maintenance hatch had been left open. Beyond it, a narrow walkway led to an observation platform that extended out over the cargo bay. The railing on that platform had gaps, large enough for a small cub to slip through. And below the platform was nothing, a 300-meter drop to the hard metal floor of the cargo bay. Chirped and walked toward the hatch. Her small claws could not grip the smooth metal floor. She slipped, caught herself, and kept going. She was curious. Cubs were always curious. She did not understand danger. Started moving before he realized what he was doing. No, he called out, "Stop, come here." Looked at him with her big eyes. She did not understand his words. She chirped again and turned back toward the hatch. Broke into a run. The cub reached the hatch and pushed through it. The walkway beyond was narrow and slippery, wobbled, her small arms waving for balance. She took another step, another. The gap in the railing was right in front of her. Hit the hatch at full speed. His shoulder slammed into the frame, but he did not stop. He could see ahead of him, could see her reaching for something beyond the railing, could see her small body tilting forward. She slipped. One moment she was standing on the walkway. The next moment she was falling, her small form tumbling through the gap in the railing, her mouth open in a silent scream. 300 meters below, the cargo bay waited like an open grave. Did not think he dove. His body left the walkway. His arms stretched out as far as they could reach. The universe shrank to a single point, a small gray cub falling through the air, her tiny claws grasping at nothing. His fingers brushed her tail. He grabbed, he held. The weight yanked his arm down. His chest slammed into the railing with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded through his ribs, but his hand did not let go. He could feel his tail in his grip, could feel her thrashing and screaming 300 meters above nothing. His other hand found the railing and held on. His whole body was stretched between 2 points, one hand gripping the cold metal bar, the other hand gripping the cub's tail as she dangled over the void. Screamed. It was a high, thin sound, full of terror. Her small body twisted and flailed, making it harder to hold her. "Stop moving," gasped. "Please, please stop moving." She did not understand. She kept thrashing. His grip began to slip. Below them the cargo bay waited, patient, hungry, final. Closed his eyes and thought of his mother. He thought of the smell of the sea. He thought of everything he would lose if he let go. Then he pulled. Pain was everything. Pain was the universe. Hung half over the railing, his ribs screaming where they had hit the metal bar. His left hand gripped the railing so hard he could feel the bones grinding together. His right hand held his tail, the cub's small weight pulling his arm down toward the void below. 300 meters. If he let go, she would fall for almost 8 seconds before she hit the floor. 8 seconds of terror, 8 seconds of screaming, and then nothing. He would not let go. Thrashed and cried. Her small claws scratched at the air, trying to find something to hold. Her screams echoed off the metal walls of the cargo bay, a high sound that cut through skull like a knife. Every movement she made sent fresh waves of pain through his arm and shoulder. "Hold still," he gasped. "Please hold still." She did not understand. Of course she did not understand. She was a baby. She was terrified. She did not know that her thrashing was making everything harder. His grip on the railing began to slip. The metal was smooth and cold, and his palm was wet with sweat. He had maybe 30 seconds before his hand gave out, maybe less. He needed to move. He needed to pull her up, but his body did not want to cooperate. Every muscle burned. Every breath sent fire through his broken ribs. "Move," he told himself. "Move or she dies." He pulled. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than leaving home. Harder than learning alien languages. Harder than standing in a room full of predators and pretending he was not afraid. He pulled with everything he had, dragging small body up through the gap in the railing. Inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter, his arm screamed. His shoulder felt like it was tearing apart, but he did not stop. His tail came up first, then her back legs, then her body. She was still crying, still thrashing, but now she was close enough that he could wrap his other arm around her. He let go of the railing and grabbed her with both hands. For one terrible moment, he felt himself sliding forward. The weight of the cub plus his own momentum was pulling him over the edge. The void yawned beneath him, hungry and patient. He threw himself backward. His back hit the walkway hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Landed on his chest, her small claws digging into his uniform, her face pressed against his neck. She was shaking. He was shaking. They lay there together on the cold metal floor, both of them trembling, both of them alive. Stared up at the ceiling and tried to remember how to breathe. His ribs were definitely broken. Maybe his shoulder too. His hands were bleeding where the railing had torn his skin, but none of that mattered. The cub was safe. Made a small sound against his chest. Not a scream this time, something softer, a whimper, a plea. She was scared and cold and wanted her grandmother. Wrapped his arms around her and held her close. He did not know the words to comfort her in her own language. He did not even know if cubs could understand words at her age. So he said the only thing he could think of. He whispered, "It is okay, you are safe now, I have you." The words were Korean. His grandmother used to say them to him when he was small and afraid, when storms came in from the sea, when he had bad dreams, when the world seemed too big and too scary to face alone. Did not understand the words, but she understood the tone, the softness, the warmth. She stopped shaking and pressed closer to him, her small body curled against his chest like a baby animal seeking shelter. They lay there for a long moment. The stars shone through the observation window. The cargo bay waited below, empty and disappointed. His heart pounded in his ears, but slowly, it began to calm. Then he heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps, many of them coming fast. The doors to the observation deck burst open. Guards poured through, their black scales gleaming, their weapons drawn. Behind them came moving faster than had ever seen her move. They stopped when they saw him. A human on the floor, holding their sacred. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The guards stared at with eyes full of murder. The throat vibrated with a growl so low he felt it in his bones rather than heard it. He could see their muscles tensing, their claws extending, their bodies preparing to tear him apart. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply lifted from his chest and held her out toward her grandmother. "She fell," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I caught her." They stepped forward. Her golden eyes moved from his face to the gap in the railing behind him. She was reading the scene, understanding what had happened. seeing the truth in the torn uniform, the bleeding hands, the broken body of a prey creature who had somehow saved her grandchild. She took from his arms. The cub immediately burrowed into her grandmother's neck, chirping softly, seeking comfort in that ancient embrace. They held her for a long moment, then she looked at again. "You are human," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "You have no claws, no armor, no weapons." "No." "You could have died." Thought about that, about the void, about the fall, about how close he had come to losing his grip. "Yes," he said, "I could have died." "Why?" This voice was soft now, curious, confused. "Why did you save her? She is not your blood, she is not your species. Her people have called your kind prey for generations. Why did you risk everything for her?" Looked at her small gray form pressed against her grandmother's scales. He thought about the answer, but there was only one answer, the only answer that mattered. "She was falling," he said. "I was there." They stared at him for a long, long time. Something changed in her eyes. Something shifted in the way she held herself. And then, slowly, deliberately, she lowered her head. The guards gasped. Some of them stepped back, as if struck by a physical blow. Did not understand what was happening, but he knew it was important. He knew it meant something. Behind the doors opened again. More predators entered. Others. They had heard the commotion. They had come to see what was happening. They saw the human on the floor, broken and bleeding. They saw the with her head bowed. They heard the whispers spreading through the crowd. The prey creature saved her cub. The human caught a falling child. He risked everything for someone else's grandchild. One by one, without a word, every predator in the room bowed their heads. And lying on the cold floor of an alien space station, finally understood that everything was about to change. The silence was heavy. It pressed down on the room like a physical weight. Lay on the cold metal floor and watched as more predators entered the observation deck, with their silver fur and golden eyes, with their glowing stripes and 4 arms, warriors in black armor, species he did not recognize, shapes he had never seen. They came in groups and alone, drawn by the commotion, curious about what had happened. And every single one of them stopped when they saw the scene before them. The human on the ground, his uniform torn, his hands bleeding, his body broken. Though with her head bowed, holding her to her chest. The other predators standing with their heads lowered in that same gesture of respect. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was soft chirping as she nuzzled against her grandmother's neck. Tried to stand. His ribs screamed in protest and he fell back to one knee, gasping. A guard took a step toward him, but the raised one clawed hand and the guard stopped. "Do not touch him," they said, her voice carried through the silent room. "He is now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Did not know that word. He did not understand what it meant, but he could tell from the reactions around him that it was important. The guards looked at him with different eyes now, not hunger, not contempt, something that might have been respect. High Arbiter pushed through the crowd. The leader of the stood over 2 meters tall, his face unreadable. He looked at the gap in the railing. He looked at the... "Tell me what happened," he said. The spoke. She explained how had wandered away from her guards during the recess, how the cub had found the open maintenance hatch, how she had slipped through the gap in the railing and started to fall. And then this human caught her, they said. He dove over the edge. He grabbed her tail as she fell. He pulled her back with his bare hands, his clawless, armorless human hands. He broke his own body to save my grandchild. Turn 2, is this true? Nodded. It hurt to speak, it hurt to breathe, but he forced the words out anyway. I saw her fall. I did not think, I just moved. You did not think about the danger. There was no time to think. You did not think about the fact that that her people have treated your species as lesser for generations. Looked at now sleeping peacefully in her grandmother's arms, at the small, soft creature he had almost died to save. She was a child, he said simply. She was falling, nothing else mattered. Stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, the great wolf-like alien lowered his head. More gasps from the crowd. The high arbiter of the most powerful predator at the summit was bowing to a human, to a prey creature, to a species that had been dismissed and ignored for decades. "Among my people," said, his head still bowed, "there is a saying. The true measure of a hunter is not the prey he takes, but the cubs he protects. By that measure, Park of Earth, you are more of a hunter than any of us." The words spread through the crowd like fire. The true measure of a hunter, the cubs he protects. Within minutes, everyone on would know what had happened. Within hours, the story would reach every ship in the sector. Within days, it would spread across the galaxy. A human had saved a predator's cub. A prey creature had risked everything for a child that was not his own. The delegate stepped forward. She was tall and graceful, her 4 arms folded across her chest, her glowing stripes pulsing with soft blue light. "I am matriarch of the Third Pride," she said. "I speak for my people when I say that we were wrong about humans. We saw your soft skin and your dull teeth and we thought you were weak. We did not understand." "Understand what?" asked. The matriarch smiled, showing her fangs, but it was not a threatening smile. It was sad and thoughtful and maybe a little ashamed. "We did not understand that true strength is not about claws or armor. It is about what you are willing to sacrifice, what you are willing to risk, what you are willing to die for." She bowed her head. "You have shown us something we had forgotten. Thank you." One by one, other delegates came forward. The offered words of respect, the swore oaths of friendship. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly looked at with new eyes. He did not know what to say. He had not done anything special. He had just acted. He had seen a child in danger and he had moved without thinking. Any human would have done the same, wouldn't they? But as he looked around the room, as he saw the bowed heads and heard the quiet voices, he began to understand something. The predator races had spent thousands of years measuring strength by the ability to kill. They had built empires on violence and domination. They had conquered worlds and crushed enemies, and climbed to the top of their food chains through blood and death. And yet none of them had thought to save a falling cub. None of them had moved when slipped through the railing. They had been too slow, too surprised, too bound by their hunter instincts to react in time. Only had moved. Only the soft, clawless, armorless human had thrown himself over the edge without a second thought. Maybe that was strength too, a different kind of strength, the strength to protect instead of kill, the strength to save instead of hunt, the strength to see a child in danger and act no matter the cost. They approached him again. She still held, but now she reached out with her free hand and placed it gently on shoulder. Her claws could have torn him apart. Instead, they rested against his torn uniform with impossible gentleness. She said again, "Do you know what that word means?" "No," admitted. "It means one who has bled for a cub not their own. It is the highest honor my people can give. You are part of my clan now, Park, my family, my blood. If anyone threatens you, they threaten all of. If anyone harms you, they face the wrath of our entire species." Did not know what to say. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The smiled. It was a strange expression on her ancient reptilian face, but somehow it looked right. "Come," she said. "Let us get you to the medical bay. You have broken ribs and torn muscles and probably a damaged shoulder. You need treatment." She helped him stand. The crowd parted before them, every predator bowing their head as passed. He leaned on this arm and walked through that forest of fangs and claws, feeling more confused and overwhelmed than he had ever felt in his life. Behind them, still sleeping peacefully, made a soft sound in her grandmother's arms. She was dreaming, and in her dreams she felt warm hands catching her as she fell. 3 days had passed since the fall. sat in the medical bay of, his ribs wrapped in healing bandages, his shoulder held in place by an alien device that hummed softly against his skin. The doctors had been gentle with him. They had treated him like one of their own, like family, like. He still was not used to that word. Ambassador sat beside his bed, reading reports on her tablet. She had not left his side since the incident. Every hour, it seemed, new messages arrived from Earth, from the colonial authority, from governments and organizations and ordinary people who had heard the story and wanted to know more. "The United Nations wants to give you a medal," said, not looking up from her tablet. "So does the European Union and the Asian Coalition, and at least 40 individual countries." "I do not want medals," said. "I know, but you should understand what you have done. For decades, humanity has been trying to earn respect from the predator races. We have sent diplomats and scientists and soldiers. We have offered trade deals and technology and promises of alliance. None of it worked. They saw us as prey, inferior, not worth their attention." She finally looked up at him. "And then you caught a falling cub and everything changed." It was true. The summit had been transformed by what happened on the observation deck. Species that had ignored humanity for generations were now eager to talk. They had offered humans provisional membership in their hunting packs. They had proposed a formal alliance. They had declared a member of this clan with all the rights and protections that brought. Even species that had never met humans before were reaching out. Word had spread across the galaxy in a matter of days. The story had been told and retold, growing with each telling. Some versions said had fought off a dozen attackers to reach the cub. Others said he had fallen 300 meters himself and survived through sheer will. The truth was simpler but somehow more powerful. A human had seen a child in danger. A human had acted without hesitation. A human had been willing to die for someone else's grandchild. That was the story that mattered. On the fourth day, the summit reconvened in the Great Chamber. Attended, despite the protests of his doctors. Helped him walk to the observer section, but before he could sit down, High Arbiter raised one clawed hand. "Park of Earth," the leader said, his voice filling the chamber. "You will not sit with the observers today. Come forward." The crowd parted, walked slowly to the front of the chamber, every step sending pain through his healing ribs. He stopped before, unsure what to do. "Kneel," said. Knelt, the movement hurt, but he did not show it. "For 500 years," continued, "this summit has been reserved for predator species. We believed that only hunters deserved a place among us, only those with claws and fangs and the ability to kill. We were wrong." He reached down and placed one massive paw on his shoulder. "The predator races have debated long into the night. We have argued and discussed and finally agreed. From this day forward, humanity is no longer classified as a prey species. From this day forward, humans are full members of the Galactic Concord, with all the rights and responsibilities that brings." Looked up in shock. "Full members, but we do not have claws, we are not hunters, we do not." "You protect," said simply. "You see the helpless and you move to shield them. You see the fallen and you reach out to catch them. That is not weakness. That is a different kind of strength, perhaps a better kind." The chamber erupted in sound. Howled, hissed, roared, but this time the sounds were not threatening. They were celebrating, welcoming, accepting humanity into their ranks. Did not know what to do. He looked back at who was crying openly, tears streaming down her weathered face. She had spent her entire life fighting for this moment, and now it had arrived in a way she never expected. The approached, still carrying in her arms. The cub was awake now, her large eyes fixed on. She chirped and reached out one small claw toward him. "She remembers you," the said. "Cubs do not usually remember things at her age, but she remembers your hands, your warmth, your voice." Reached out and gently touched his outstretched claw. The cub made a happy sound and wrapped her tiny fingers around his. "I am glad she is safe," he said quietly. "She is safe because of you." The golden eyes were warm. "My people have a saying, the debt of a saved life can never be repaid, but we will try. For as long as they exist, we will remember what you did. We will tell our cubs, and they will tell their cubs, and the story will live forever." The summit continued for 3 more days. Treaties were signed. Alliances were formed. Humanity's place in the galaxy was secured, not through strength of arms, but through an act of simple compassion. When it was finally time to leave, found himself standing at the docking bay, watching the stars. His ribs had mostly healed. His shoulder was still sore, but getting better. In a few hours, he would board a ship and return to Earth, return to his mother's restaurant by the sea, return to the life he had known before. But everything was different now. He was different. Joined him at the window. She did not speak for a long moment. Then quietly she said, "You know, I asked you once why you did it, why you risked everything for a cub that was not yours. I remember. You said she was falling. You said you were there, that nothing else mattered." "Yes." Smiled. "I have been a diplomat for 40 years. I have studied alien cultures and negotiated treaties and worked with the most brilliant minds humanity has to offer. And in all that time, I never understood what makes our species special. I thought it was our intelligence, our technology, our adaptability." She shook her head. "I was wrong." "What is it then?" asked. "It is exactly what you said. We see someone falling and we reach out. We do not think about whether they deserve it. We do not calculate the risks or the rewards. We just move, we protect, we catch, we hold." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "That is what makes us human. That is what the predators saw in you. Not weakness, not prey instincts, but something they had forgotten how to feel." Thought about that. About the observation deck. About small body falling through the air. About the moment when he had dove without thinking, when nothing in the universe had mattered except catching that child. "Do you think other humans would have done the same?" he asked. Laughed softly. "I think most humans would have done exactly what you did. That is what terrifies the predators. They thought we were weak because we lack claws, but now they understand. A species that will throw itself into danger to save a stranger's child. That is not a species you want as an enemy. That is a species you want as a friend." A chime sounded. Their ship was ready. Took one last look at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a he had never seen, was sleeping in her grandmother's arms. She would grow up hearing stories about the human who caught her. She would learn to walk and talk and hunt, and she would always remember the feeling of warm hands and soft words in a language she did not understand. "It is okay. Everything is okay." He smiled and turned away from the window. It was time to go home. But as he walked toward the ship, he knew that home would never be quite the same. Because now, everywhere he went, he would carry a piece of with him. A piece of the moment when a falling cub had changed everything. The predators had bowed their heads in silence. And humanity had finally found its place among the stars.